Welcome to the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in critical times. Here's your host, Bill Kelly.
Hey, welcome to another edition of the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in these critical times. I'm your host, Bill Kelly. Good to have you with us today. Holding politicians accountable. Now, some people may think that that's akin to trying to herd cats. Yeah, I guess you can do it, but good luck trying to do it effectively. We've been trying for years and years and years, and there's always the concern about politicians and elected officials, what they say, why they say it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've talked about this on the podcast many times, too. But it's a laudable goal. And a number of you have asked me to comment about a petition that's going around these days that many people think, with all the best of intentions, I guess, that this petition might just spur the debate and maybe a call to action to maybe do something about more accountability. The petition is called, E-6679. It's an electronic petition for the House of Commons, and it's suggesting that federal politicians and candidates who knowingly mislead the public should face penalties, including potentially being disqualified from sitting in the House of Commons if, in fact, they are proved to be uttering falsehoods. It's rather a long thing. I don't want to read the whole thing for you here. You can probably go check it out online, E-6679. But briefly, it says here, whereas members of Parliament, MPs, have been accused of making important public statements that are false and without evidence, misinformation is a growing threat to the proper functioning of, as well as our faith in, our democratic process. As a mechanism is needed to verify MPs' public statements and to maintain that credibility, then you blah, 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 sign this petition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes on to outline what they like to see happening. Now, for a petition to be presented to the House of Commons officially, it needs only 500 signatures. And apparently, this petition has thousands and thousands of signatures, so it's crossed that threshold. The question here is, what's going to happen if it is presented to Parliament? How are they going to respond? And is there really a snowball's chance of anything really happening as a result of this? Well, all very good questions. I'm not sure that we can supply hard and fast answers to that, but maybe a little background on this. First of all, the petition is basically being presented by a guy from Toronto, who I was told at one time was an Ontario Conservative candidate. His name is Federico Sanchez, and he basically says that he wants more accountability. In an interview that was published in CTV News, Sanchez says that he says, well, he wants to stop the flow of bad information that's happening in politics these days. Says he wants to prevent Canada from heading down the path of the United States, where he sees unchecked spread of political misinformation eroding public trust. Well, there's a massive understatement. He goes on to say, he says, we don't have as bad a problem with information here in Canada from elected officials. I would beg to differ, but that's his opinion, I suppose, because I think we have a major problem with it. And so he's figuring that people can sign this petition, then at least there'll be some accountability. Now, the couple of things about this, and first and foremost, let me go on the record, anything that can make a politician or any politician or elected official more accountable and more honest with the public is a good thing. And you know, we support that sort of thing, right? But how effective can something like this be, and how would it actually work? Not in theory, but in practice. Because, as we mentioned, there have been other attempts to try to bring elected officials, to the straight and narrow. Municipally, they've done this some time ago. A number of municipalities right across the country right now have hired integrity commissioners. And that was at the behest of an awful lot of people that were concerned about some of the stuff that was going on, the hanky-panky, the misinformation that was going on at the local level of politics. Good idea? Yeah, sure it was. But in practice, a lot of people were disappointed with it, quite frankly. Who's going to be appointed as the integrity commissioner? Who do they answer to? In other words, who's going to be the judge and jury on this? How do they get their information? And if they do render a judgment, how effective is it, and can it be enforced? Because we saw some major problems with some of this. For instance, with this proposal here for this particular petition, they're saying that any registered voter would be allowed to apply for a correction order. But the court would be able to dismiss any application that's deemed to be trivial, vexatious, or lacking a reasonable chance of success. Well, Let me tell you about that, because we've seen this happen. I was on city council for 9 years in Hamilton, but I've covered many other cases in other municipalities and communities around the country about this as well. And here's something about the way the media works that we have to understand, and we can't go into this naively. Okay, if citizen A files a complaint against politician whomever and say what they're saying is untruthful, it's a lie, it's slanderous, whatever the case might be. The headline is, and that's or on social media or wherever you get your information from, the headline is going to be that the charges were laid, not that there's any validity to them. It's always front page news. Councillor so and so, MP so and so, charged with. Boom, big information about that. Now, that's the story. So there's an argument to be made there by many people, and it has been made there, that the very fact that these things are published all of a sudden is demeaning to that person's character, to their reputation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, whether or not what the accusations are true or not, the story, the most salacious part of this is the fact that somebody decided to bring this up and to shine the spotlight on that individual. So all of a sudden, in many people's minds, that elected official, at whatever level it is, we'll talk about federally here since this petition is dealing with the House of Commons, but in many people's minds, that elected official is guilty already simply because, first of all, the preconception many people have about elected officials, that they're all, kind of shady and on the take and in it for themselves, etc. But so it doesn't take a whole lot to convince people in the court of public opinion that the fact that, a citizen decided to call somebody out on a particular item or continue a mistruth, whatever the case might be, that they're guilty before this thing even starts. And that can be harmful to a career. Just laying that out there. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the reality that occurs here. So there's that element to it. The other element, too, is exactly how this is going to be enforced. Now, the petition and the people that are drawing this up say they've addressed that. They're using almost as a benchmark for this, a hallmark for this, similar legislation that the government in Wales is looking at right now. And basically what they're suggesting here is that this model, it removes the ambiguity of previous models. There's no requirement to determine intent, and it preserves the right of freedom of expression of politicians. So that's all well and good. And they say that if, they're going to issue an order to either, retract the statement that the politicians made, which is deemed to be incorrect or false, whatever the case might be, and they've got a period of time to do that. And if they don't do that within 7 days, without a reasonable excuse, according to this rule, the proposal at this stage, the court could issue an order preventing that politician from holding office in the Welsh Parliament. And they'd like to see the same thing happen in the Canadian Parliament. I don't know how enforceable that is. We do have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Is the intent here to say that if you lie in the House of Commons, that's a criminal offense? And a judge can actually prohibit you from running for public office or boot you out of public office? I don't know if that's going to hold up in court. It may be a laudable goal, and we got to really hold these people accountable. But I'm not so sure that that's really the way to go in situations like that. I think if challenged, people may find that's really a bridge too far for the judicial element of this to look at and say maybe it's a far too punitive penalty. But the most important thing that we need to talk about here when we're talking about accountability, and we see this all the time. I've talked about this on the podcast all the time. There are one or two politicians whose names just come to mind immediately that I have called out, and I think justifiably so, as people that just spew BS and untruths time and time and time again, and they get away with it. And I've got a problem with that A, they're doing it, and B, that many people in the media these days simply turn a blind eye to it, or a blind ear, whatever the case might be, deaf ear, and simply say, well, we're not going to challenge that because I don't want to get in trouble. And we've seen that already. The story that we covered just the other day, the big to-do down in the States these days about, the East Wing of the White House being demolished. And a number of reporters have decided, okay, we're going to hold the president accountable for that because it looks like laws may have been broken the way that he proceeded. The head of CNN, the new head of CNN, who clearly, by the way, is a Trump, has basically, we're told, sent an internal memo around telling all his reporters, back off, lay off that story altogether. Well, So where's the blame in a situation like that? In other words, if the media is not going to cover something, does that give the elected officials free rein to do whatever they want and say whatever they want without any accountability? And then it's up to private citizens, such as what this petition is suggesting. But the culprit here, that I see anyway, is to a certain extent, and probably to a larger extent, almost on a growing basis, on a daily basis, is the social media platforms themselves, because they have no rules. There used to be standards on things like Facebook and well, Twitter, as it was called back in those days. But the powers that be, the Bezos and the Musks and others that basically control those platforms now, basically in the name of free speech, are allowing anything on there. Anything. They don't care if it's false. They don't even check anymore. So an MP or whoever we're talking about here may well quote something from one of those social media sites that may be totally false. But their justification for it and their defense of it, if somebody raises an issue like that, is simply going to be saying, "Well, I didn't know it was on that media, so I'm simply repeating what I read." And let's face it, there are some politicians that are pretty coy about this. And they know how to go in the side door. Well, I don't know if this is true, but it was reported on such and such a platform, that the MP from so-and-so broke the rules or did this or, took a sidebar bet and, he's got a big brown envelope full of money in his desk drawer, whatever the case may be. Now, I'm not saying it's true, but it's out there, and maybe we should look into this or investigate it. Well, that the accusation is there. Is that lying? Is it misrepresenting the facts? Yeah, probably. But is it difficult to prove? Absolutely it is, that there was an intent there. So, and again, I just wonder if these guys are going to get dragged down and stuck in the minutia of this whole thing. And again, I don't want to get into stereotypes too much because, first of all, I don't want to substantiate them. But there is a feeling right now that many politicians of all political stripes tend to play fast and loose sometimes with facts. And they can be rather salacious with what they want to say and what they want to do. And that can be problematic. So, all of a sudden, as a petition like this and new rules actually going to change that? That's pretty hard to say and pretty hard to do. Because the defense for a lot of these officials, because sometimes they do get called out on this, is that what they're actually talking about is some version of the truth. Maybe not the truth, but some version of it. So, how culpable are they in situations like that? This is not a black and white issue. I wish it were. I wish it was easy for us to simply say that was wrong. That person should be held accountable. But there are so many extraneous factors to situations like this that I think it's going to be kind of like trying to, nail Jello to the wall to try to get somebody who actually is going to be found to be culpable in situations like this. And that's really the nature of politics. So it's going to be very difficult for enforcement of this. So I'm just pointing this out. I'm not suggesting it's not worth pursuing. Sure it is. Anytime that we can try to find a way to tighten the standards and hold people to those standards, that's always a good idea. I get that. But I'm wondering practically if this is really doable. With all the best intentions of everybody and the thousands of people that have signed this petition, good on you. That means that you're socially and politically responsible as citizens, and you want to see these people held accountable. But the ultimate problem here is going to be that who's going to decide whether or not this is worth pursuing? Those very people that we want to hold accountable. In other words, when they get enough signatures, and it looks like that's going to happen, if they make the presentation to the Commons about this, it's going to be up to the parliamentarians to decide what they're going to do. The Winnipeg Free Press did an editorial on this a couple of weeks ago and said, we should ask poll all the members of parliament and say, are they in support of something like this? Of course they're all going to say yes. Of course they are, because they know that they'd be vilified if they said, no, we don't want to be held accountable. Of course. But what are they going to do about it? There's the rub. Because politicians, especially at the federal level, have shown a real resistance to anybody trying to lift up some rocks and see what's going on there. Because we've talked about this, and other groups have talked about this over the years, to do with things like with their pension plan, any number. Money always comes down to money, doesn't it? Whether it's their expense accounts, whatever the case might be, and the answer invariably from the parliamentarians themselves is, "Oh, we can police ourselves." And if we see a wrongdoing, we'll bring it up and we'll make sure that the appropriate action is taken. a lot of people in this country don't feel comfortable with that. That self-policing is somewhat problematic. Because does that mean that they're actually going to do something about it? Or does that just mean that they're going to shove everything under the carpet and pretend that everything is rosy here? So, that's the concern we have to have here about just how this is going to roll out. The Welsh model is interesting, and I understand the intent of it. But if this is presented to Parliament, let's assume that it is, and parliamentarians have to respond to this. There's an old trick in politics, and you've seen this at all levels, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, or state, or federal in the states, of course, is let's table that. We're not going to vote on it. We're going to table it and study it. And politicians are great at this. They study things to death. And the phrase that's used in politics, rather cynically, but I think it's very apt in this case, is paralysis by analysis. When there's a hot potato like that, politicians will simply say, yeah, we accept that petition, and that's a major part. Yes, we will receive the petition, and we'll study it. We'll send it to the committee in charge of, should this go in the blue box or not, whatever the name of the committee is, and they'll study it. And of course, a year from now, somebody's going to say, hey, is that study going? It's ongoing. It's ongoing. We're looking into it, hoping that the furor about this whole thing is going to die off in a period of time, because it can open a can of worms for an awful lot of politicians and elected officials that they just wouldn't be comfortable with. And I hate to be cynical about this, and I hate to suggest that this may not have the happy ending that a lot of people that are supporting of this petition would want to see. But the BS and the untruths and the lies that are going on, sadly, are really up to us to do our own homework to be accountable for, because the source of an awful lot of this misinformation, of course, as we mentioned, is from social media, and right now it's a Wild West show. They can say and do whatever they want, and people that post on those social media sites can say and do whatever they want, and a politician or his or her staff are going to go over all of these sites on a daily basis, basically looking for dirt, looking for something that they think is going to embarrass the opposition MPs or the opposition government, whatever the case might be. That's the game. I don't like it. I don't think most of us like it in any way, shape, or form, but it's the way they play it. And I'm all for trying to find a way to try to make this a more transparent and a more honest idea. But it's not going to happen with one petition. And that's, I think, what we have to look at from a realistic standpoint here. That, yes, we need to strive for this. But, this is not the answer. Let me put it that way. And again, I'm not trying to degrade the people that are doing this. It may be the beginning of finding the answer, and that's a good step. So, carry on. If you haven't signed the petition and you do research this and think, yeah, this is worthwhile, sign it. By all means, sign it. And let's just see where this goes. Maybe I'd love to be surprised to say politicians are going to take this to heart and say, yeah, we need to do something about this. But I'm just skeptical based on track records over the last however many years in politics, especially these days when political ideologies are so entrenched and there's no reaching across the aisle. There's no reaching a standard. The standard here is to try to basically defeat and embarrass your opposition these days. It's not to work with them anymore. And we're seeing that even in this parliament that's only been sitting in this house now for about 6 or 7 months since the last election. So tough road to hoe. Our congratulations to those that signed the petition, and we'll continue to track the story and see just what happens. But let's maintain the rigor that we've already tried to impose here on elected officials, and simply say that if we really want to hold them accountable, that's up to you and me, and ultimately we have the say as to whether or not they're allowed to seek office in the next election. If in fact we find that they are egregious in their defiance of the norms that they should actually be adhering to, we get to vote, and that's the ultimate decision making. That's it for this edition of the podcast. Great to have you with us today, as always. If you're on YouTube, hit that notification bell for us. And thanks, as always, for those that are subscribing. We really do appreciate that. The support that you're giving us so we can continue this work is greatly appreciated. Thanks to Madeline Kelly for the great work putting this one together. Until next time, I'm Bill Kelly. Stay in touch and stay informed.
Bill Kelly Podcast brought to you by Wizen's Law, personal injury lawyers. Listen, you didn't choose to get injured, but you can choose the right lawyer. Wizen's Law, 905-522-1102 or wizenslaw.com.